So as you read earlier in the chat, when I accidentally pasted it in there for all eyes to see, we're joined tonight by Eric Kunsman. And Eric was born and raised in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And he was heavily influenced by the death of the steel industry and its place in American history. And this interest in industry and economy has informed much of his photographic work. In his current project, Philosophic Calculus, which he'll be discussing today, along with some other projects that brought him to this project, examines the alleged relationship between still functioning payphones and the socioeconomic status of the neighborhoods in which they exist. Eric's work has been exhibited extensively, and he has been recognized by publications and organizations such as Black and White Gallerist, the Association of Photography in the UK, Critical Mass, the Warhol Foundation, and Lenswork, among many others. And Eric currently lives in Rochester, New York, where he lectures at RIT and owns Booksmart Studio. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric and disappear.
Well, thank you, Dale and Halide Project for having me tonight. Let me start the share screen. All right. So one thing that Dale and I talked about that I wanted to do tonight is not just talk about that particular, the Philosophic Calculus project, but kind of give a background to what's led me to this particular project, because I think it lends itself really well to why it kind of caught my attention. But as you heard, I'm in Rochester, New York. That's, make sure we can go. So this is one of my favorite sayings. Everything looks worse in black and white. And as you'll see, even my own father at one point, and I had to show at Mercer County Community College, he's like, what's wrong with color? Why does it all have to be black and white? So that's one of the things that's really influenced a lot of my work. But growing up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I was going through high school. I mean, I graduated from being born there through high school. And then once I left, I never really went back. But I always had a love for history and photography and for fine arts. And it wasn't until later that I actually got into photography, but I really enjoyed how it blended with the idea of capturing history and as an art form in itself. And obviously in high school, was introduced to work at Walker Evans, which many of you might recognize this cemetery. Was able to get access to going into the steel. And at that time, it was actually shutting down right as I was graduating high school. And just knowing most of my family, some of my other statements I talk about that I was either supposed to be a roofer or a steel worker. Well, that went away in 1994 when I was going through at the time, and I didn't want to work for the family roofing business. So that's where I wound up going to college, starting more with fine arts, moved into then photography. In fact, transferred to Mercer County Community College for 1 year because I was kind of lost. And that's when I was introduced to RIT, which I'll mention in a few seconds. But this is some of my early work from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I said I was able to, being, living there forever, happen to know plenty of people that worked in the steel, that I was given access. But I was always drawn to this cemetery, the good old Walker Evans Cemetery, as everybody calls it, at least in photography. But again, this is so between 4x5, 35 millimeter medium format. But this is one of my favorite photographs that I took there, which is the mother, father, brother, which really just encapsulates what Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was for me. I joke with a lot of my students from RIT now that when I go back home, it feels like New Jersey's invaded because it's between having the casino. So sorry if you're from Jersey, Gary Zaretsky, I saw you're on. So, but with that in mind, it's just completely different. And I mentioned Mercer County Community College because I studied under Lou Draper, and I credit him for being my largest / greatest mentor, because I really did learn more from him in 1 year than any of the other faculty at RIT. I had no idea about RIT, and Lou's like, this is a school that would be right for you. And this is just some of his work. And a lot of this work that I'm showing right now, I was able to watch him work in the darkroom. He was one of those faculty members that what he would do is he'd be working right next to us side by side in the darkroom during open darkroom times. And we'll talk a little bit more about his work a little bit later on. But I still remember seeing almost all of these being printed in the darkroom right next to me. The reason I want to show you this background stuff is when I went through RIT, I really don't have much of my personal work that I enjoyed. I don't show anything. This was an internship I had at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. So I was able to do some pretty cool stuff. I double majored in fine art and biomedical photography at RIT. And the reason is I wanted the geek and the artist. And you'll see that becomes a recurring theme in a few minutes. But this is some of the stuff I was able to do. They're from night vision, refueling the Blue Angels, from wing walking, jumping off the planes. If anybody believes that, these were Photoshopped. They were actually on the ground. I was able to go up and take this photograph with the Golden Knights parachuting team, so that's real. But afterwards, when I went back to RIT after the internship, I was telling my faculty I was wing walking, even though I had a cast on. And they're like, that's unethical. I'm like, well, you've taught me how to do this in Photoshop. But this is where I got that shot. And a lot of that RIT geek training allowed me to learn how to capture what I was doing at McGuire. For instance, this one, the Golden Knights are gone faster than I could snap my fingers. I wound up having to just put a fisheye lens on and just sat there with motor drive on. I had no idea this is film, so I had no idea what it was until I got the film back. And I think I just went through about 24 rolls because all I was doing was just sitting there with the motor drive on. It wasn't until I went to the Southwest. RIT in the past had a class called the Southwest Photo Workshop. This is when we were in Moab, Utah. Flood came right through our campsite. But I went a roundabout way of going there. I went through North Carolina, through New Orleans, and then headed out to Southwest. And I had a wooden Whistler 4x5 camera, and I used to shoot Type 55 all the time. And the reason why I enjoyed working with Type 55 was I can pull it there, wash it, but also give the positive to, I was able to give one to each of these kids that were street performing that day. And these individuals as well. And that was one of the greatest things I thought about Type 55. I could take my negative with me, but give the individuals I'm interacting with a physical print. This is some of the work that I actually created on that trip. And it became a pretty important body of work for me because I wound up having an exhibition of this work at Mercer County Community College. I just finished my undergraduate. I was in the graduate program for the Masters of Science, which was the printing. And that's where I joked that Booksmart Studio, my company, it's a combination of RIT, the MS in electronic publishing, and my MFA from University Arts in Philadelphia. But this work is something that I showed at Mercer. It was a two-person show. Lou Draper insisted that I have a show rather than he, and that was in November, and he passed away in February. So I was able to meet Dean. They called me, asked me to apply. They said, look, they're not running the search. It's being run through Rowan University because of politics. But I really believe it was because of Lou. I showed this work to him when I got back from the Southwest. He insisted that I have it shown there. And little did we know what would happen with the future. The second time I went out to Southwest, I tried being too geeky. I took this is a Dycomed 4x5 scanning back camera with me. So instead of having to look through the hood of the 4x5, I was looking through at the laptop. And carrying this through the Southwest I only did it for about 4 days, and then I went right back to film. But on that trip, again, that idea of working with Type 55, this is a photo shoot. This is when Los Alamos was on fire in the 2000s. And I created this body of work in 20 minutes, which was the firefighters that were fighting it, that were Native American. And I kept thanking them. They kept thanking me because I was breaking up the monotony of their day, but they were modeling. So I was running around with my Wisner as well as the Graflex camera. And I was able to capture these all in under 20-minute period. I had both cameras on tripods, knew where I wanted to try to put some of the individuals. But for me, I was able to give them that positive, the print, and I was able to keep the negative. I actually shot 2 exposure for each one, just in case anything happened in negative. So I'd actually have one for myself, just in case it became too scratched or deteriorated, because I couldn't clear it right on the time because I was running around. But we had some fun with the firefighters. Another big thing that I work on at RIT is something called the Big Shot, where we go around to different locations, typically once a year pre-COVID, and we get between 200 to upwards of 2,000 individuals we've had help us in the past, where we paint with light at night, long exposures. Sometimes we actually have strobes set up, like at Churchill Downs. We have pro photo packs. Others individuals were showing up with flashlights. And the reason why that's important is the body work that I created in Philadelphia when I was going through University of Arts for my MFA was utilizing that. And I'll talk about that in a few moments. So when I finished my master's of science at RIT, I wound up teaching there for 2 years, but knew I needed to leave. So when I went down to Mercer County Community College to run the photo program there, I wound up working on my MFA at UArts at the same time, but I spread it out over 3 years rather than 2 years. But I was able to take my students from Mercer County Community College out to the Southwest. And that was the only 4x5 photograph I took the entire trip, because trying to help students walk away, come back, it's really not conducive to working with the 4x5. So I wound up creating a body of work, which was with a Canon 10D digital camera at the time, and it's titled Peripheral Visions. And this particular body of work, the reason it's peripheral visions, this image right here, you can see the repeating trees. It's actually 390 degrees. So I've always kind of mixed film and digital, and that is kind of reoccurring depending on what the body of work is and what's needed. I have not printed in the darkroom though since 1999. I still develop my film unless it's actually printmaking, non-silver processes. That's the only type of what I would call true photographic processes that I still work with. Otherwise, it's all done via inkjet since 1999. So the body work that I completed with my MFA at UArts, it was called Thou Art Will Give. And the reason why this project started, and this is the work that was in Lens Work, I think 2019. It really started because of visiting Haiti Kyle, who was my bookbinding professor at the time at the American Philosophical Society. And I came across these books, and there was 7 of them. And instead of looking at everything else we were supposed to, I wound up just reading these and made an agreement that I would go back and photograph every page and give them a PDF of the images because they were falling apart. And then that way I had access to them. And I would read between 4 to 6 pages before I'd go in and photograph each day. Over 3 years, I was in there probably about 362 times there at night with ghost hunters, but it really became about the text and imagery. David Graham at UArts was like, come on, you can't make original work there. There's too many tripod holes. But then when I had my show, he came up and he hits me in the back of the head and says, way to make your own tripod holes. So that's when I knew, hopefully it was something different than what's been done at Eastern State before. Because I used to rent the penitentiary out just like University Arts does with the students from Mercer County Community College. And they would be so enamored with this space, as many photographers are when they go there, that the next time we would go back, I would lock the students into a certain area. And so you can't leave from here. So that way they really focus on what they're looking at. But you can see how a lot of this is with the text and imagery. The painting with light. If I'm sure those that are from Philadelphia that have actually gone there, you know, the lighting is, you have the very spiritual lighting coming down, but it also doesn't lend itself to photography. And that's where a lot of this is longer exposures, painting with light, 2 to 10 minute long exposures. Very little of it is just available light because we have to fill in these areas, at least in my opinion. So this body of work, I've had 24 solo exhibitions with it. But what a lot of people don't realize is when I came back to Rochester in 2005 and started my studio, from 2005 to 2012, I did not take a single photograph. I really didn't even finish this body of work until 2014. So this is my end date. In 2012, I realized, you know what, I need to start doing my own photography again. And some people are like, why do you do so much right now? I feel like I'm making up for those 7 years. I'm not afraid to admit it, but in 2008, my business went into over $300,000 in debt, which held up a lot of things, including Gary Zaretsky's on also. We produced Lou Draper's book with Mercer County Community College. So a lot of things from my own photography, finishing Lou's book took a lot longer than it ever should have. And part of it was what had happened in 2008. And that's where these next bodies of work that I'm going to show you and the philosophic calculus, I don't think if I had that much debt at that time and what had happened, it really wouldn't push me to what I'm doing with these two bodies. And we'll talk much more about that in a few moments. But this exhibition at the Dyer Art Center at NCID, I had 185 pieces. And these gum bichromate prints were my way of expressing how much the logs meant to me. They were not perfectly registered at times. If you wanted the perfectly registered and printed, they were downstairs in the exhibition. So, and that's one thing I've always had, where individuals have the ability to read the same logs that I had access to. And I've had curators say, you know what, we're not going to put those up because nobody reads. Like, believe me, please call these other curators or email them. Crowds develop around the log books. Canson used it in advertising, as we talked about before, about lens work. Gallery that represents me out in LA, Hote, they created a special limited edition portfolio of the pieces that were in lens work. Out of the 50, I think they sold 2 or 3, maybe. So those are still around. But one thing I want to illustrate is there's 2 different ways that I show this, because a lot of places that I exhibit tend to be college and universities. And with that in mind, they don't have enough funds to pay for shipping all the time. So if they do have funds and we can afford it, I will ship it framed. If not, you see on the left-hand side where I've used earth magnets, but I tend to paint them white so they disappear into the paper. Here's another example of that. And here it is in frames. This luckily was a local gallery or college gallery in Rochester. So very easy to get it there. I'm sharing some of this work because I want you to realize that I'm not one of those photographers that thinks of an idea and goes out and does it. It's really one of those things that they kind of hit me more than anything else. My second year of teaching, my second day of class was 9/11. And rather than teaching shutter speed and f-stop, the first student walked in, Joanna, I remember, she said, you know, I know you have a cell phone rule, but my aunt works in South Tower. What can I do? I said, there is no rule. There are no rules today, but you can either answer it in the classroom or you can walk out to the hallway. So what we wound up doing is just talking about how photo and video would influence that day moving forward. And we decided to collect every newspaper we could. And we got them as far away as Macedonia. And we wound up with, I think, about 84 different newspapers. And so 15 years later, what I did was, you can see the writing on the wall here. I went back to resurvey them to see if what we did in class, what they remember, did it help them process what happened during the day? And this was an exhibition in 2016 that we put up at what was Gallery R for RIT. And it was really all about the students and the newspapers. Some students remembered every last detail, some remembered nothing. So this is where I talk about the fact that a lot of my work is reactionary more than anything else. And that was one particular exhibition. So my studio in 2005, we had a 13,000 square foot space. We had 2 galleries. We sold the paper, we sold printers, and that's really what led to my debt. But we had a workshop area, color management area. We had a 13,000 square foot space. I had 8 employees. I now have no employees, and I say it all the time. I've never enjoyed my life so much since I have no employees. I get to pick who I work with. But the studio really is a culmination of my RIT and university arts background. The arts and the handmaking of the books is really the right-hand side of the brain. The geeky side, the printing and color management that I teach at RIT really is the left side. So I joke that I have split personality issues with photography. This is just a panorama for an exhibition we had in the gallery spaces. But producing my books, other individuals' books, this is one I created. It's called Exposing Saints. Katie Kyle, mentioned her earlier. She was the one who created the flag book structure. This is Dan Larkin, who is a faculty member at RIT. He's the one who used to nickname me Booksmart Boy. And that's where the studio name comes from, Booksmart Studio. Making clamshell boxes for photographers and artists. This is for Marshall Shuttley. He's actually just had his book published by Chris Gray's project in the past few months. But what I want to get into now is a series called Private Back Go Back Now, Private. This was in 2012 when I finally got to the point where I had enough of my debt paid down, and knowing what New York State did to my business. We won't talk about too much, but they did not make things any easier. In fact, they made it a lot harder. So this is a series that I started to create, which is really a reflection on my feeling towards the elite in upstate New York and the idea of the Rust Belt in New York State, between Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Western and upstate New York is where this series comes from. And it was really my first chance to get back into making photographs. And I kind of haven't looked back. Right now, I currently have about 4 or 5 different series going on. This is still continuing, as well as my felicific calculus. And I'll show some examples of some others. Short time. A lot of the idea of technology influencing growth, which I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I do not believe in that. I feel like wherever I move, I kill the local industry, because as soon as I moved to Rochester, Kodak has pretty much died off. So you don't want me to move your town if you have any heavy industry. So again, this is shot on film, and the reason for me was just getting back into photography. I needed to be slowed down. So this is the Kodak Hawkeye plant, but I never really ever got away from shooting film. Whenever I'm out photographing, I have everything in my car, from the 4x5 Wisner camera I have to my medium format, including the digital that I have. And the reason is, it really depends on what attracted me. I work with each project differently. My current series that I'm doing, that's another one after felicific calculus. I'm actually working with my Fuji GFX 100S, and I'm not working with film. And it's just the way that I see it. My daughter Viviana and my son Bryce are 2 of my bigger influences. My best critic right now is my daughter Viviana. And this is a real session where she will go through and mark up my prints and tell me where they need to be improved. She lets me have it. She will tell me if the image is just no good. So that's where, and the reason why I bring them up is this is another series that I created. It was, again, another reaction. My son's school, they had to hold a mock election when it was Hillary and Trump. And the reason why they had to do that is the kids were no longer playing kickball on the playground. Instead, they were debating Hillary versus Trump. And so he was in 1st grade. And I never thought I had to talk politics to my son until one day we asked him who he was going to vote for. And we realized how much the TV commercials were influencing him. So I started taking screenshots. And this is a website which I plan on leaving up for free so that this archive can live on for future generations. But it's called the Fake News Archive Project.com. And what I started doing at first was screenshotting CNN, because that's what was being attacked the most. And then it grew to CNN, ABC, Fox, New York Times, Washington Post, and Huffington Post every day. And that way you can see the range of left-leaning and right-leaning news media. And it was planned to be red, white, and blue. But then once COVID hit, every month became its own volume. And it was no longer just the headlines. Also, this is multiple times throughout the day. You can watch the time change as we go through. And it wound up turning into 15 volumes, each 12 by 18 and over 500 pages. And so I felt that this past election, no matter if you're left or right leaning, it didn't matter. We needed to look at everything again. And so a few galleries, Rochester Contemporary Art Center, this was an exhibition that was talking about the past, present, and future of media. So on the right, and actually in the middle right here, is a fake history of society. My books were about what's happening now. And then Bill Posters had deep fake technology video. So this was our president doing the ABCs at the time. But these books are large enough to basically kill somebody, because each one, I think, weighs about 24 pounds. But for me, it was about getting it out into the public. And so here's a time lapse of one of the events at A. Smith Gallery. It was done at Rhode Island Center for Photography and Cultivate 712 in Waco, Texas. And the idea was to allow the participants, whoever comes to the exhibition, and the entire time it was up, this is just the opening evening. The participants were taking the news that they felt needed to be rebroadcasted. And so it's one way that I've really started to have influenced my work, is to get I get off this, get individuals to participate in the exhibitions. And you'll see that happens again with felicific calculus, because too often people are just walking through the galleries, looking at the work, and then they might reflect on it for a few minutes, but then it's gone. So my belief is the more we can get them involved, the better off it will be. So felicific calculus, technology is a social marker of race, class, and economics in Rochester, New York. This is a series that I'll talk about most today. But what I want to do, I'm not going to show you this whole video because it's 21 minutes, but I'm going to show you 4 minutes and 20 seconds of this video because it really opens up what I'm doing with this project. It'll also give you some funny moments to watch. So I'm going to share this now. In 2017, I relocated to a different part of Rochester, New York with my studio. My company's called Booksmart Studio. For 10 years, it was near the Eastman Museum. We had 2 galleries. We were constantly showing, different exhibitions, even for the Rochester Institute of Technology where I teach. In 2017, the building owner passed away and his son took over and put us on a month-to-month lease. And I had way too much equipment. So I finally started to look around outside of neighborhood arts because I just couldn't afford anything in that area to purchase. Because we need a fairly large space. So I started looking in different areas of Rochester and found where I'm currently at right now, which is the home of Booksmart Studio, which is up near the baseball stadium and the soccer stadium in Rochester, known as the Hosanna neighborhood. The knee-jerk reaction I was getting from a lot of friends, colleagues, was that this area was a war zone. So I started looking at why this labeling was being applied. And I noticed 3 things: neighborhood bars, corner stores, and an abundance of payphones. So I settled on just documenting the payphones at first as social markers. Get some to eat afterwards, but if it's okay if I take a picture of your payphone. So we're taking a picture of just a payphone. Are you okay with that? I was just gonna take a picture of your payphone. I know it sounds a little bit weird.
Yeah, it's good.
I've documented all of them in Monroe County, that's all.
Oh, okay.
So the project has actually evolved from, at first I'd be driving around. I had some friends, Matt Geisey and Dan Hughes and Adam Montoya would drive around with me, and we would just literally be looking for payphones. The joke was, it was payphone hunting.
It must be that building, that nice building back over there. Right there it is. In St. Paul.
Within 6 square blocks, it was pretty easy because there's about 45 around my studio. But then it grew to be more about the city, so we started driving to different areas to photograph.
Yeah, Rich. Just go in and scout it out first.
I'll be right back out. Is it okay if I take a picture of the payphone? Okay, I have a guy videotaping me too, and then we're gonna eat afterwards.
I got him on TikTok.
Oh, he's documenting me, yeah. But...
One technology to another.
Exactly. We still have a lot of them still in Rochester, so. And the pork, yep. It's exactly, most people think crime, but it's not.
No, it's not. People have to be able to communicate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is where we have 1,455 of them. Two kinds of shooting.
Trying to get out of this. Sorry, trying to move on. Oop. All right, so let me make sure we're at the right spot. So the one thing about this series that I was talking about, where I was talking about the knee-jerk reaction, also it'll be shared in the chat. That's a 21-minute long video. I just want to show you those 4 minutes because it really encapsulates what this project is about. But the first truck that I backed up, it took 15 truckloads to get all the equipment over here. But these three boys came over with the first load I was bringing in. And from right to left, it's Harry, Elijah, and Grumpy. And halfway through, I'm like, they're like, do you need help, mister? I'm like, yeah, sure. If you want to carry some stuff in. Halfway through, they're like, are we going to get paid? And I'm like, guys, I don't have any money. Like, well, what do you have? We went through the kitchen cabinets here in the studio, and previous owner left coffee mugs. So I went through, they're like, can we pick whichever one we want? I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, as long as you guys all finish carrying those rolls to the back. And Grumpy, you need to tell me your name. He goes, mister, my name's Grumpy. I'm like, no, your real name. He goes, look, I've been grumpy since I was 1 when my mother took a lollipop from me. My name's Grumpy. I'm like, all right, nice to meet you. So when my son comes down to the studio, because he's their age, the only one that's still around is Harry Jr., which is on the right. He's one of the 3 kids that my son will play with when they're down here at the studio. But I was lucky enough to find a place. And at first, when I was looking to try to move out of where I was renting and to try to buy a place, my notion was, okay, I need to look at Neighbor of the Arts. And then somebody said, look at this church in the Ninth Ward. And I did, but I'm like, I couldn't afford the heat, even though it was only $40,000. So I found the space I'm at now. It's been photos since the 1960s. And I knew the previous owner. She was last part of her divorce creed. She's trying to get rid of it. So we wound up settling within 29 days. And so this is where I've been housed since 2017. And if it wasn't for that knee-jerk reaction of everybody labeling this area where I'm at and meaning to, it was like in the movies that you see where everybody's coming over, introducing themselves as I'm unpacking, moving stuff in. And everybody watches out for each other in this neighborhood. And what people don't realize is it's a mix of white, black, Latino, everybody lives in this neighborhood. But the one common thing is the average income of the families is under $26,000 a year in this neighborhood. And that's where that mislabeling comes in. So I started looking at why, as you heard before. And with that, I started driving around, and some of these first images here, this is about 4 blocks from the studio. It's literally in the middle of the neighborhood. And so at first I was, just photographing them. I didn't have any title for the project. I didn't even know what it was. And I was supposed to have an exhibition at SEPA Gallery for the Eastern State Penitentiary work. They came out for a studio visit and I had some work prints out. And they're like, we don't want to show the penitentiary work anymore. We want to show this. I'm like, I don't even know what it is. They're like, well, you have 3 years to figure it out. And so the project has just grown leaps and bounds from portfolio reviews, talking with colleagues at RIT, just the fact of how they're all labeled with the phone numbers and trying to record the address, which ones work and don't work. Well, that's how the project started out, was the idea of social markers. Then as I was photographing them, I started noticing people were still utilizing them in Rochester. And when people were using them, I was like, wait a minute, there's something off with this. I mean, we're in 2017, 2018, that notion that I thought everybody had a cell phone also, but they don't, and especially with the homeless. But it's not just the homeless, it's in the poor areas like my neighborhood. And this is the corner store right by my studio. This is the one that I walk to. And you can see there's 2 on one side and 1 on the other. And again, was just going around at first photographing, and it just kept growing. So the idea of people using them, and at first I really didn't want to include people, and I still don't. And one of the reasons is, as soon as you see that somebody is black, white, or Latino or Asian, you're going to try to label that area. And that's one of the reasons why all this is shot on Kodak Portra 400, 800, or 160. And the reason is because that's what I can have either processed by myself or the lab at RIT. And one question I get, and which you might have from looking at the video, is why are you carrying a digital camera also? Because I have the lab at RIT develop probably it's about 75% of my film. If something happens to that because it's student run, I want to make sure I have a backup because I never know if a phone's going to be disappearing or taken down. But that's why I carry both the Hasselblad as well as the digital camera with me at all times for this project. There are 2 shots, which I will not name, which unfortunately something did happen to the film. So I had to fake it because I didn't want to have where it doesn't have the Hasselblad frame edges and explain why, where it should fit in with the others. But that's something that I did have to do as a false. It's fake. But another part is revisiting the locations, because that in itself tells a story. I want to show you these 2. Many of the locations now I have photographed upwards of 8 times, and seeing the area around the payphone change really tells the story itself. So you see the before and after. This building suffered a fire. That's where the billboard's gone. Busy Bee restaurant. This is 2 payphones that I saw used the most. And this is where the project really changed for me. I pass by Busy Bee every day when I come in from the suburb that I live in to downtown Rochester, when I'm coming to the studio. And these 2 payphones, this restaurant serves a good meal, $6 sandwich, a side, and a drink, all for $6. It's right by the homeless encampment and our open door mission, which is one of the homeless shelters. And these were 2 that I saw use all the time pre-COVID. There was a news feature a few weeks ago. I went back by because knowing these were normally used quite a bit, and these 2 have stopped working. I don't know whether they will be repaired or not, but these 2 served as a lifeline for individuals. But as I keep talking about how the project grew, I realized that it couldn't just be my photographs to tell this story. So at first I started looking at census data by myself and really looking at the housing income. And this is where you see the dark red is where it's under $28,000 a year for a household. I live over here in the right-hand side where it's nice cyan area. But then also looking at things such as population density. So a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it must be really populated in that area. That's why there's so many. But if you look at the income in that area where it says Rochester right now, compared to, there really isn't a lot of people living. It's more or less the court, the businesses that are down here. And you can see that's not why there's that concentration of payphones. And that's where I realized that I needed to integrate the payphones with the maps. And so this is my first attempt on my own at creating the maps and just pulling the direct census data. So let these play for a few moments. So you can see, looking at race, class, and economics, as the title talks about. And I knew I was in over my head with this. So I enlisted help from some other faculty members at RIT. One is Rebecca Walker. She's digital humanities and social science librarian. And Janelle Dudabunwar. And what she does is she works with the police department. Her role has changed from being a visiting lecturer to now her title is Senior Research Associate for the Center for Public Safety Initiatives. And they're the ones that work with data all the time. We are in our infancy of working together, but for the SEPA exhibition that I will talk about in a few moments, these are the maps that we created. So one of the problems that we have in Rochester is the only open police department really is the Rochester City Police Department. The suburbs, they don't share their data. So if we were to map crime, it would look like only the crime is happening in Rochester. So we avoided that for now. And what we're really trying to show is right here, you can see the predominant race, the economics of the housing, as well as family incomes. And this is where you see housing income spending more than 30% on their housing, and trying to bring factual data from the census information. The only map we felt we could use, which is right here, the heroin overdose, you can see that it's countywide. And the newest map of that, it's actually, there's more hotspots out in the actual suburbs. But what that map is showing you is where it's bright red and yellow that's where our open air heroin market is. And that's where we're trying to overlay the density of the payphones. But what a lot of people don't realize is that here in Rochester, we have true statistics that 77% of the heroin overdoses are white, 14% are Latino, 7% are Black. So that mislabeling that's being applied that it's a poor areas drug. That's not true. People are driving in, not waiting to shoot up, and that's why they're overdosing downtown. Now they are starting to drive out to the suburbs more, and that's what you're seeing with the latest maps. So another piece that's really helping to drive this data with this particular project, because again, I don't want to be on a soapbox showing my photographs trying to illustrate this idea within Rochester, and it's going to go out to other communities as well. But each photograph is labeled by the phone number, the address, and the zip code. And there was a walking guide, and that's what comes with the actual book itself. So you can actually look at some of this data rather than just on the maps. We can look by zip code at what the percent below poverty level is. For 1614, we can see 48.5, so half are below the poverty level. Even breaking it down to ages. So we're really trying to put that data out in front of people so that they can reflect. So first they look at the image, they have their own view of the aesthetics of it. But then if they start to look at the data, look at the address, look at the zip code, and go back to the walking guide, it helps to paint a picture of what's actually happening here in Rochester, New York. So these are some more of the images. This is another one that I've gone back to many times. Oops, it's probably going to reappear in this slideshow. I apologize. One of my favorite images was this one, just because of how it's pointing back to the payphone, as if we're going back to the technology that's being required. But this is one that I photographed over a period of time. I apologize, these are actually reversed. The one on the left should still have the payphone because the barbershop disappeared, went out of business. A slushy store popped up instead. And because they were worried about security, they cut down the trees and took away the payphone. Going through Genesee Brewery. I've been lucky enough to be invited into quite a few places like Kodak Park, the Genesee Brewery, RGH, one of our hospitals, and Frontier has sponsored the work by giving me the list. So I now know that there's 1,455 payphones. And I'm no longer just driving around looking for them, but instead, what I'm able to do is go to these locations, and even if it's not there, I want to document it. This is one that's in my neighborhood that I pass all the time. This is that corner store where there was 2 in 1. This is the image that won the photo review last year. This is an incredible color photograph, but I cannot display it that way because these chairs are 1970s orange and the background of the building is a magenta. Just going to go through some of these so you can look at them. This one was recently taken out by the building owner because he was repainting it. That one worked. And when the writer from Bloomberg and I were rephotographing this, the guy came out and he goes, "Oh, it never worked." I'm like, it had a dial tone. He goes, "Oh, I just didn't want it there." Because I had seen that one used. After Daniel Prude was killed in Rochester, New York, we had riots here as well. And this was a Family Dollar store, and they destroyed this payphone that I saw used quite a bit. So this is 2020. This is 2021. Frontier Communications is still repairing the payphones that are being used the most. So that's where I talk about the project title being Fellowcific Calculus. It's because Frontier, even though they're losing money on this, they're still supporting these payphones, at least the ones that are used quite often. This is our inner loop, which everybody's talking about now. It's a hot topic in the media, which is the highways in to cut off access to the poor areas. So everybody that worked for Kodak, Xerox, never had to drive through the city. They could easily get in and out to their suburb. Here's an image. Frontier Field is our minor league baseball stadium. That is the payphone company. Well, that's our cable, internet, the payphones is Frontier Communications. They actually have the naming rights for the minor league baseball stadium still, even though they're in bankruptcy, they're still doing that. And you see the good old Kodak Tower looming. I was challenged in 2019 by Mary Virginia Swanson And her challenge to me was the idea of, it's great having this in galleries and museums, but if you're really trying to get this knowledge that these still are a lifeline out to individuals, you need to think outside the box of not just having exhibitions. The only exhibition I've had so far has been SIPA Gallery, but the local free newspaper, Dato and Dec Uno, Bloomberg Business Week in the past, was it 4 or 5 weeks ago, ran an article both online and in print, which allows me to get it out to more individuals. Yes, only a certain class reads Bloomberg Business Week, but the city newspaper, that's something that's free. And it's trying to get that knowledge out. And from that, the local news station, Spectrum News, picked it up. Humble Arts Foundation. So I have a mixture of media outlets. I'm trying to get this out to start making people aware of what's actually happening. Here's an image from Kodak. One of my ultimate goals once COVID's over, well, somewhat over, and people are actually going back to work a little bit more, is to do a fence installation downtown on all the different architectural fences and Kodak Park. And the reason is put the photographs out there, the maps with QR codes. And I'll talk about the audio in a few moments with what I'm doing. Try to speed up so we have some time for Q&A. If people are in the frame, I tend to make sure that you cannot discern race or class. They are a figure at times, but the reason I want you to think about the environment of the photographs. Here's one that was supposed to have 4 payphones, looked like 3 spirits, $3 snackers. I found out thanks to social media, the only time I'll say thanks to social media, that 3 people had been killed there 3 weeks before. And just the whole 3-3 was really odd. And this was not where they were killed. This is just the remnants of the payphone. If we're in person, this is my portfolio. This is where I joke that the MFA in book arts and printmaking allows me to make the clamshell box. So up to today, I've photographed over 900 of the payphones. There's 1,455, as you saw in the video. My intention is to get to every location that I can. If for some reason I can't get inside, Alison Nordstrom had talked about the idea of photographing the outside of the building, at least to document where it was and kind of show the conditions, which makes sense. But I still want to try to get into every location that I can. I'm showing you basically 50 of them. So last spring was that date that I had the SIPA Gallery exhibition. I had all 3 spaces there. And the reason why I want to show you this right now, what's important about it is here you can see a payphone that's been installed in the gallery. This shows the different approaches that I'm trying to use to get this in front of people, because now what I'm also doing is recording audio stories of the individuals when I find them that are still using the payphones. That way it's not me trying to tell their story, but instead we're able to use their own voice. And that's what's being replayed back through the payphone. So you can punch in a number, and there's a guide at the exhibition. There was actually a guide there for numbers that they could punch in. It would ring, it would pick up, you'd hear the audio. This one also had my stories and what I've encountered at each of these spaces. That way I could explain why the one that's boarded up was repaired. Otherwise they might not relate what happened with Daniel Prude in Rochester. And this is an example of the maps. Again, if it's just on the wall and you're not interacting with, what are you actually going to learn? So the clear overlay is where you have the density of where the payphones are, and underneath is that census data. And there were 5 of those in the actual exhibition. And here's where you see 4 more. So in total, I believe there are 85 framed pieces in this exhibition. We had the maps. And in the 3 different gallery spaces. For me, it was fun, even with COVID. You can see we use phone books to actually have the handy wipes, so people felt okay picking up the phone, dialing number, and listening to it. There was a book that's published, which is also still available online, which is a soft cover book, about 200 pages, along with that data and map visualization. Even though you weren't able to be at the exhibition and walk around with that guide, you can still look through the book and see the phone number, address, and zip codes. I worked with a gentleman Screwy Blooms, we brought him out to Buffalo. Again, another interactive piece. If you're on Instagram, you should follow Screwy Blooms, as well as Ryan Stephen Green, who I saw showed up today, who's Los Angeles Payphones. With that, and the whole idea is taking the empty ones that don't have payphones and actually doing something creative with them. The entire idea, if you're walking down the street, you look over at it, especially for the Buffalo Bills fans that you see on the right-hand side, should make them smile. But I think the most important part to interact with the Buffalo community was this event, which was called Buffalo, New York Payphonography. I scouted out beforehand. There were enough payphones that we could do this. In Philadelphia, there would be enough to do this also, but not every city. I want to work with the curators to identify a social marker and then invite the community to go out and photograph their, well, whatever that social marker is. So here, there were prizes by Fuji. They donated 3 cameras. I donated some of the prints that were in the exhibition and some printing services to get the community to do so. And I believe we had 651 or 561, might be inverting those numbers. But what we did is we printed their pieces that they submitted, and they were in the annex to the basement gallery where I had a few pieces hanging. And it really became about what the Buffalo community captured. And people were interacting with it. And during the closing, we took that data that they created for Buffalo and recreated the census maps, as well as overlay with most of the payphones that they recorded were. And why did one show up 25 times in this project and some of them 1 time? And that's where you start to look at where people feel comfortable going throughout Buffalo. And that's what we talked about at the actual closing. And this is something that I plan on trying to do wherever I exhibit this work in the future. And real quick, go through some of these. This is that one where there was the Arby cups. As I said, I go back and rephotograph it. Now the Cricket store is tormenting the payphone. Sears, as we all know, payphones went along with the store. And our McDonald's near RIT actually has a payphone spray painted as the artwork. And this was supposed to have a payphone inside of it. So I used their phone number that it was supposed to be. There's 2 more things that I want to show you. And the reason for this real quick is lifelines throughout the United States. It's to really emphasize that Rochester is not the only place. Whenever I've traveled from my exhibitions in the past 4 years, I will document the payphones in those locations. My daughter saw this payphone before I did. She shouted it out on the shuttle going into Muir Woods. All the adults turned around and looked at her and said, how would a 5-year-old know what a payphone is? She gets off the bus, skips over to it, picks it up and says it works. And all the adults were looking around as if it was a candid camera moment. New Orleans, Tucson, if you start thinking about wherever there's larger homeless population. And again, this is just a supporting element that we're not the only ones left, either A, as a social marker, or B, as the idea of actually needing the communication. So Reading Terminal Market in Philly. Brandywine Laundromat. So you'll see Philadelphia is represented here as well as the Midwest. It's not just airports. Some of my favorite ones were in Joplin, Missouri. They drove through the store, but luckily they missed the payphone. A Superfund site, Ventura, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania Turnpike. So again, this is whenever I've been able to travel. But what I want to show you real quick is, for some reason, when I was scouting the Buffalo payphones, I did not see them square and in black and white. I don't know why. And that's where I tend to adapt to the environments and whatever I'm photographing. And these are digital. And one of the best things about this project is people, store owners will come out very hostile. And the writer from Bloomberg saw this. They come, what are you doing? This and that. But as soon as I say I'm documenting the payphones, their mood instantly changes. There was one of the shop owners in Buffalo that said, can you please get a payphone back? Our community needs it. I'm like, that's not what I'm doing right now. But that is something I'm trying to work towards in the future in Rochester. Just have a company in Portland, Oregon, Futel, is installing payphones and allowing them to be free, voice over IP. And that's something that when Frontier takes these away, there's certain areas like the YWCA, which is the battered women's shelter. Make sure that that still has a payphone that can function. And they also make it where you can install history lessons, so it breaks down some of the race and class barrier for the individuals that are still working with it. Last few images I'll show you is this is completely off on a side tangent, but it's something that's grown out of felicific calculus, which is if I truly believe in this neighborhood that I'm living in, or not living in, but have my studio in, documenting the people, showing that it is white, Asian, Latino, and Black. It's everybody in this neighborhood, and everybody watches out for one another, which is very different because I normally don't take portraits of people. But I just wanted to show that it's called Before Noon. I've actually been doing it in other locations also. I don't know where this is going. I'm just showing you something that I don't have on my website, but something that's just kind of a work in progress. I have a few different series that are ongoing besides felicific calculus, but that's where I wanted to kind of give you that overall and keep it under that hour. So I'll stop sharing.
Just made it.
Well, we started a little late with the intros and stuff.
With the intros, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Eric. And thanks for giving us all like the sneak peek of the new work. If anybody has any questions, if you'd like to put them into the chat, you could do that. You can also use the raise hand function if you'd like to actually ask a question with your voice. So do that, and I'll click on to allow you to use your mic. We'll also, we save the chats too. So if anyone has not a question, but a comment or something to share with Eric, you can put it in that too, and I'll share the chat with him afterwards. We do have a couple questions. So Gary's asking, where are your upcoming exhibits?
The only exhibit that I've booked right now will be at the Rhode Island Center for Photography. With COVID, I've kind of gotten away from self-promo, and because everybody's schedules have become so convoluted because of trying to make up exhibitions, that I've really just have focused on making the work right now. So Rhode Island Center for Photography will be one. And then after that, I have nothing booked, which it's kind of odd. It feels really free in a way. It's not good when I might be moving into tenure track and I need to get some of those lined up. So
Nice. Angel, hello, Angel. She's wondering what you decide to print in gum. And I think that goes back to one of your earlier projects.
Penitentiary.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandra Davis, who's also on, is somebody, she worked with me at Mercer County Community College. We've taught at Peters Valley. We would always schedule to be there at the same time back when I was teaching there also. But for me, the gum, because working with the CMYK, bringing them back together, I was able to put a lot more of how I felt about the logs into it. So I normally don't print a lot in gum at this point. If anything, it would be more platinum, palladium, and calotype. But for those, I wanted to bring that color back across and not make them feel like it's just a historical document, but also be able to work with some of them. Literally, they were misregistered where one, maybe magenta and yellow would be upside down, but C and black would be the right side up. And some would be perfectly red because of the emotion that the person was writing in. It was pretty important because they wrote about whether the person was too stupid to live, how much they drank, and it was male, female. One thing that I didn't mention about those logs is at my exhibition, Wayne Connolly, who's from Inova Paper, he had come to one of my peripheral vision exhibition, and then he came to my thesis show and he's like, are you busting my chops? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he drags me over to an image, and it was Eliza Connolly. He goes, this could be my great grandmother for all I know. And she was in there for trying to poison the gentleman and woman with whom she lived. And that was an icebreaker where they started sponsoring my work, taking me to different countries. But that logbook, that one page, kind of helped move my career a little bit more. And so there's a lot of influences on those. And that's why I chose to do the gum. So it's a long, again, it wasn't a choice. I was trying to really bring the emotion out. And that's, I felt gum bikerment was the only way to do that. And Sandy loves teaching how to do the composite of CMY. So
We do have a question. Cassandra, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. What I loved your presentation. And as you went through your various projects, it sounded like you didn't always start with an agenda. And here you are with what you're photographing now. I would think would clearly fall under the social justice agenda. Are you happy with that? I mean, because I mean, you're doing art now that is absolutely transformative in the communities where you're operating.
I'm actually much happier now that it's actually transformed into that. And the reason is, even the Art Will Give was about the idea that, you know, and Eastern State's trying to do this now, talk about prison reform and how things haven't changed over a period of time. They've actually completely changed their agenda and what they are there. And I think for me personally, where if it was just a social marker, all I would be doing is saying, hey, look at the area my studio's in.
Right.
But now pushing it further and working with the colleagues, it really is becoming a social, you know, socioeconomic agenda, trying to look at what happens with these payphones when they're gone. What's going to happen for, you know, some of my neighbors that still use the payphones.
Mhm.
They might have a pay, whatever, the disposable phones, or, you know, where they pay monthly, but when they run their minutes, they subsidize it by using the payphone, even though they're 50 cents for a phone call. And another thing we don't think about is psychiatric hospitals, prisons, where they still rely on payphones. They're charging people $2.35 a minute at times. So they're price gouging. So yeah, there's much more, but I think it's right now, it's what keeps me going, because otherwise I would have burned out at payphone number 600. But working the data.
And one more question. So you've mentioned your daughter a couple of times. So tell me what kind of camera you're putting into her hands, because it sounds like she's got the eye. She's got the eye. How else are you pushing her or encouraging her, I should say?
I'm encouraging her through all art forms. So right now she's in dance, gymnastics. She loves, so any of her friends, when we didn't have coverage during Zoom, luckily I could bring them down to the studio. And if I could show you my hardwood floors, it's filled with paint. I would roll canvases out and just allow them to do whatever. And my daughter loves to work. Whenever she paints, then she'll take whatever she can find and build layers. I blame that on Screwy Bloom, by the way. And Ryan, but this summer, ironically, so since she's only 6, my son's 11, my wife and I, we took a 2.5-week vacation up to New Hampshire and Acadia. And what I was able to give them each was a Fuji digital camera. And normally the head butting in the car ride, it wasn't there. Instead, which they weren't going to get anything good, but they're taking photographs out the car window. And of course, everything's blurry. So right now it's really about that. Something I took out on my slideshow that I have shown in the past is when my daughter was 2 years old, she used to steal my wife's iPhone and convert it to black and white and start documenting the house.
Oh my gosh.
Documenting messes, documenting me sleeping, my son sleeping. So she kind of has the bug, but my son used to have it. So I'm trying to make sure she doesn't lose it.
Okay.
So.
Love your work. Love your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you help me help all of us to see, just by focusing on that one thing. I guess what a path of privilege we all walk through, that those are invisible to us. Payphones are invisible for most of us, but they're, like you say, a lifeline for a huge swath of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And what you said is very, very important to me. And that's why me not being a white man sitting up on the soapbox trying to tell this story, that's why it's been so important. And that's where in the video, I don't include, there will be some voiceover from those interviews. But again, part of it trying to hide the race and class of these individuals and just have it be about the story. is trying to help that also. That's what I'm hoping to do with it. Trying to be
Thank
very
you.
sensitive to my privilege.
Powerful story. Thank you very much.
Sandy Davis put in the chat that she would love to see the work in person. So I think everyone's going to have to make a field trip to, what was it, the Rhode Island Center for Photography?
I'm going to start, don't worry, I'm going to start applying to places in Philadelphia and other locations. So that's the next thing that I will be working on. But for me, the fun part to that is that community event where we get the, you know, whatever the city is. And then, so we had Fuji sponsor those 3 cameras, but it's about that engagement with the people and talk about your community. So hopefully someday soon it'll be down that area.
Who do you work with to identify the markers? Like if it's not payphones in a particular city, who do you kind of collaborate with from that city to determine what the marker might be?
So I'm really hoping to work more with the curators, but some of the curators don't know. So that's where, like in Buffalo, CK Herman, I wound up meeting him at the closing, but he was somebody who was participating. He goes, you know, I've been wanting my students to do something like this, but I was going to do corner stores, but now I might take the payphone aspect. But he's a socioeconomic professor at UB. So that's your part, is relying on other faculty or other researchers in those locations. So it doesn't just have to be the gallery and the curators. But when I've gone to portfolio reviews, like people have told me Denver, there's unpaved alleys, which are the place you should never go. Mary Virginia Swanson talked about her husband with his medical students in the past would take them 30 minutes south of Tucson, and they would do mapping where they would look at where are their sidewalks, where they're not curbs, as a way of looking. So that's why it can't just be the curators. It needs to be a community event to then get those individuals to want to be interested in the exhibition, hopefully. I love to collaborate on this. And that's where Ryan Stephen Green, I don't know if he's still here or not. He's another person. He's doing the same thing out in LA. We have different approaches to it, but social media has this weird payphonography now, as they call it, which does not sound good, but that's what it's titled. And a lot of individuals are doing this, but there's a few of us that are working together, because if we can make one map and talk about it in more cities, and then we have others that don't want to play nice with us, which is fine. Not everybody has to, but by being a community, trying to tell the story, we can get it out to many more individuals. So that's my philosophy.
It's a good one. Does anybody else have any questions? Or again, comments? If you want to put comments in the chat, I'll share the chat afterwards with Eric.
The next talk that will be at Halide Project, you all should attend. Kaito is actually one of my former students from many, many moons ago. So
Yeah, for those of you who are in the Philly area, we have an exhibition at the Halide Project that was put up in conjunction with the 2020 Photo Festival that just wrapped up in September, but the show goes on through November 7th. And we just added a closing reception to the schedule. That'll be happening on Saturday, November 6th. And the show is viewable by appointment other than that closing reception. So you can reach out to us through the Halide Project website if you want to see the exhibit in person prior to the closing. And yes, Kay will be talking at our next talk, which is in 2 weeks, which I believe the date's the 18th. Is that right? Math? Yes. So he'll be talking about the work that's in that show, and I'm sure he'll be talking about some of his previous work as well. All righty, so if there are no other questions or comments in the chat.
if you're interested in the chat, I believe it was posted, or even just search for my YouTube channel, you can actually watch that full video if you're interested. You can also see in the book, Allison Nordstrom and Benjamin Hickey from the Hilliard Museum in Louisiana wrote an introduction and forward. And there's also a video with basically in conversation with the executive director of SIPO with Allison Nordstrom up on the YouTube channel as well. And there's a lot more of the work on my website. I did not want to show it all to you tonight.
Yeah, I put a series of links that Eric provided in the chat. So if you guys didn't catch those, you could scroll back up a little bit, and there are, I think, 4 links, full-length video of the from the video he shared a clip of, and then 3 other links. One was for the website, one was for the SEPA show, and the other was from the Bloomberg article.
yeah.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
The article.
Yep. So if you miss those, just scroll back up the chat and you can get those links. And Sandy asked, yeah, we are also coming to the conclusion of our construction of the community darkroom at the Halide Project, and we are planning a grand opening. Oh, sorry, not October 14th. November 14th, which I'll put in all caps. So that's a Sunday, and we'll be having kind of an open house with the darkroom to show people around. We're also going to piggyback a fundraising event on that date and have some of our kind of overflow equipment that we have that we won't be utilizing in a tag sale. We'll also be doing a silent auction. So anybody who wants to donate something to the silent auction can reach out to us through the website, which I will put in the chat. And
It looks like Ryan has his hand raised. This should be good.
oh, sorry, Ryan. All right, you should be able to talk now, Ryan.
So, oh, there we go.
There you go.
First of all, thank you for putting this on. And I just wanted to make a quick comment, is that as many times as Eric, you and I have talked over the years, I feel like I continue to learn more and more about your work and about how you think about your work. And I think more so than any individual time we've spoken in the past, I feel like the context that this presentation provided was really clarifying and important for me to understand, like, the way that you think about the work you're doing with fellowcific calculus is elevated. I don't have a better word for it right now, but I've known that with all the data and all that stuff, but just that it's part of a story that you as a photographer are telling, and to see where it fits in is really special for me. And I also just wanted you to know that I've been paying attention this whole time, so that's why I wanted to raise my hand. I'm being a good student over here. It's actually thundering and lightning and like torrential rain outside in LA right now, which is very odd because it was like a 90-degree day today. I had one question, and that was, so you have the list, you have the addresses, you have the telephone numbers, your 900 or so phones in. The SEPA gallery was, as I've understood it, to mark sort of the halfway point of the project. I mean, where do you go from here specifically with photographing the remainder of the phones? I mean, do you have a timeline set out, and how are you going about tackling that balance of telephones?
So for me right now, hopefully I've been in a process of moving to tenure track from my full-time lecturer position since June. I'm hoping that comes to an end very soon, and this position is done, that I get to move into it, because it's going to provide me a lot of release time so I can actually try to do this. So my goal is within the next 2 years. And the reason is more and more of the phones are being turned off by Frontier, even the ones that I know are being used. So now I also kind of have to kick it in high gear. For those that don't know, I've talked to Ryan about this before, but that company Futel, where it's the free payphones over voice over IP, where people have voicemail, is I feel like I need to bump that up in priority also. For me, photographing the payphones in my other projects gives me the motivation to work on this thing with Futel and trying to get the free payphones here in Rochester. But also a big part of where I'm steering my concentration is working with Rebecca and Janelle much more and really ramping up that data. When I say we are in our infancy, we started working together 3 months before the SEPA show. And then this summer, I was so burned out from everything I was doing up to SEPA and everything else that we didn't get together. We finally got together for the first time last week. And it's like, okay, this is where we need to grow it. Where we're going to there's a dedicated website, rochesterpayphones.com, but we're going to have it where you can actually really navigate the maps and click into the data to truly see how much more information census provides. And it's not as much about photographic right now. I feel like I need to work more on the data for a little while, but to keep me going with that data, because it becomes very boring, at least to me it does, keep on photographing. And honestly, I'd like to have the last of the payphones wrapped up in the next 2 years, because with all this press and publicity and talking about social markers, Frontier is ramping up the removal of the payphones that aren't working. So that's one of the reasons where I had this data at that date that I want to talk about. So I need to get around and capture them. So long-winded answer. But yeah, no, I think hopefully you learned something, because, and that's what I told Dale earlier, that I want to share my failures, because if I didn't have the failures that I had in the past, that's really, I think, where my sensitivity comes from for this. And if I didn't have that, I don't know if I would have seen the payphones the same way. So. But thank you for coming, Ryan.
Heck yeah, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, and see, so you all know how dedicated Ryan and I are. I can joke about this. There was a payphone booth, the Superman booths out in LA. So, and Ryan's wife agreed. I bought it, and I was hoping to have a show out at the gallery, Hope Gallery, that represents my work. They have since closed the physical gallery with COVID, but it's currently sitting. Is it in your driveway still?
It's still in my driveway right now. It has 2 payphones in it, not just one anymore.
Oh, the idea of that collaboration, his poor wife has this payphone now sitting in her driveway. So yeah, we're kind of an odd group, us payphone photographers. But to me, and even Ryan, it's much, much more than just photographing payphones.
I think you've helped me realize that, actually. Yeah.
And that's what I like about your work so much. I mean, there are a lot of people, I myself am attracted to abandoned things, but you see a lot of that work without any context to it, right? And I've seen people go into the history of the places they're photographing or what have you, and that's good. That's an important aspect of it. But this work takes it even deeper. So it goes beyond just the recording of something that's visually interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the important thing that photography can do. And that's where that relationship of history and photography, for me growing up in Bethlehem, now it's more about what the data and photography can do. So that's where even Cindy Davis has known I've been doing this for a while. And as she said in the chat, she's now photographing payphones. One of my favorite things is friends texting me photographs of payphones. And all I say is, just give me the location in case I ever get to that area so I can go back. I won't bogart it too badly. But it's just fun to see. So anybody here that now, as you start driving around, if you see payphones in your community, feel free to email them just to have that connection. It's something, and some people curse me because now after this, you might not be able to not see them. And I apologize for that now. So
I think there's so many still in New York. Like anytime I go through the city, it's noticeable because there's so many of them and you don't see them as much elsewhere.
they are supposed to be removing them for the sidewalk space,
Oh,
even though
shit.
they're Wi-Fi spots,
Huh.
and also free, access for people to make calls. And something that people don't realize, if you think about it, after Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, the only means of communication were payphones. And so as we're moving away from this technology, so it's not just lifelines for everybody, but everybody says, oh, well, there's mobile hotspots. Well, what neighborhoods do you think they're going to take those mobile hotspots? And that's something that we're not thinking about either. I mean, look at all the hacks that are happening right now. Verizon and Voice over IP had huge issues last week. RIT's phone network was down. Many phone networks were down. Somebody I work with, Shades of Paper in New Jersey, because all that Voice over IP. So what happens if a big hack does happen and we no longer have landlines? So sometimes we're moving too quickly, in my opinion.
That actually reminds me, going back to your post September 11th project that you did with your students. I was at the time, I was one of the few people who I knew who still had a landline, and my cell phone didn't work for days. So I was able to like call my mom and tell her that I was okay because I still had a landline. And there were a lot of friends who I didn't hear from for quite a while because all of the cell phones were down.
Yep.
So yeah.
And that's something we don't think about as things, you know, unfold. And that's where we still have a landline. My wife wants it, not me, in our house. I want to install a payphone with it, but that hasn't happened yet.
Of course.
So, but yeah, I mean, these are the things that and that's what I hope things like that come out of this project. That yes, it is right now. We're talking about the people that are making under $25,000 in Rochester. But it's not just Rochester, it's many, many other cities that this is happening. So.
All right, anybody else with questions? Raise your hand, put them in the chat.
I see Kitty Hubert, excuse me, Hubbard is on. Excuse me. You know, there's about 25 of them on Brockport's campus. I think I need to send you the list and then you can walk me through where they are if you don't mind. So we have quite a few with the different universities, there's still quite a few on campuses too.
So everybody feel free to email Eric with all of your payphone sightings.
Please do.
The day after tomorrow.
There's many, many new movies, and that's where Ryan has been approached about that payphone. There's many movies that are using payphones as set pieces in their movies. The day after tomorrow, there's so many movies that are still using them as the last mode of communication, which ironically we're ripping out. So
right.
We're not following Hollywood's lead.
It's very short-sighted.
No.
All right, so let's all go our separate ways and watch The Day After Tomorrow and think about the upcoming apocalypse and how we all need landlines and payphones. Huh.
Thank you all for coming.
All right, good night, everybody.